Hello, math friends. Welcome to Wisekind. I'm Heidi, the founder and math enthusiast that knows that math is for everybody, and with the right help, you and your child can feel great about math. Today, we're going to review fractions. So what is a fraction? We use fractions all the time, and if you're cooking in the kitchen with your little kid, it's a marvelous place to recognize what these are. So fractions will show up on your measuring spoons and your measuring cups. And what is a fraction? It is something that tells us about the parts of a whole. We see fractions as 1/2 or 3/4, or you might even see them with a slanted line, so 2 and a slanted line, thirds. These are fractions that we might see while we're cooking or doing life. So how do you read and write a fraction? So first, with a fraction, the top of our fraction is called the numerator, and it is the number of parts of the whole that you're talking about. Then we have a fraction bar, that's the black line, and then we have the bottom number is the denominator. It tells us the total number of parts that make up the whole. So when we're talking about, let's say, your favorite candy bar, or my favorite candy bar, chocolate. This chocolate bar is already divided into 6 pieces. So when we look at this, we can say, here's piece 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the whole candy bar has 6 parts to it. That's our denominator. If we've not eaten any of the candy bar, we have 6 pieces left. So our fraction has the number of parts of the whole that we're talking about. In this case, we have 6 parts of the whole. We haven't eaten anything. And the total number of parts that makes up the whole, there are 6 parts of this candy bar. Now, let's say that you've decided that you're going to eat some of your candy bar. And so these white spaces are now gone. So we still have in our whole, we would have 6 pieces. But now, if we're talking about how many we have left, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces left. So we have 4/6 of our candy bar left. Or if we wanted to talk about how many pieces are gone, we have 2 pieces out of 6 that are gone. So the fraction just tells us how many parts make up one whole of whatever we're talking about. And the top tells us how many of those parts we want or need or have. Let's look at another example. Let's say you have a delicious looking donut, and you have to share it with some of your friends. So you've cut this donut into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. So if we're talking about this as a fraction, right now we have 8 pieces out of 8 pieces. There are 8 parts to our donut. We have all 8 of them. Now you've shared some of your parts of your donut with your friends. So now we have 1, 2, 3 parts of our donut left, and there's originally 8 parts to make up one whole donut. Okay, now that we have the basics down, how do you double a fraction? We double fractions all the time when we're cooking. So when you're doubling a fraction, what that tells us is that we need more parts of our whole. We're doubling how many parts of our whole we have, but we're not changing the size of our whole. So let's say that we have 1/3. So let's color in 1/3. So there's 3 pieces to this circle, and there's 1 colored. So this is going to represent 1/3. If we want to double that, that just means doubling is like you can add it to itself or you can multiply by 2. So 1/3 times 2. This tells us that we need 2 of these 1/3. So it's a 1/3 and a 1/3. Of course, while you're cooking, feel free to just take your 1/3 measuring cup and dump it in twice. But mathematically, what that looks like is we take our 1/3 and we add another 1/3. So we've doubled this, and now we have 2/3. So you can use your 2/3 measuring cup, or you can keep your 1/3. What hasn't changed here is the size of our parts. All we're doing is adding more of them. So 1/3 plus 1/3 gives us 2/3. We don't change the size of our parts. So when we're doubling, you don't change the size of your parts. You change how many parts you have. Let's look at 3/4. We use 3/4 all the time when you're cooking, and you'll often have to double this. So when you're cooking, doubling 3/4 looks like you can just take 3/4 and dump it in once and dump it in twice. So 3/4 double. We can also look at this another way where we're doubling 3/4. We can write this another way. Instead of having our 3/4 separated into two different wholes, we can just count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total parts. And what we can do is take one of those parts over here, and that looks like one whole. And then that leaves us with 2/4. So we can also think of 3/4 times 2 as one whole and 2/4. And 2/4 is the same as 1/2. So you can use your 3/4 measuring cup twice, or you can use one whole cup and 1/2 cup to get double 3/4. How do you half a fraction? Halving fractions can sometimes feel tricky. So when we're halving a fraction, what we're doing is we need less. So we make our parts smaller. Let's look at 1/4 visually. Here I have a square and it's divided into 4 pieces, and I only need 1/4 of it. Maybe this is a cube of butter. I have 1/4 and I decide that I need half this. So I need 1/2 of 1/4. What that looks like is mathematically that's multiplication, and I'll show that to you. But visually, what that means is we're taking this butter that I said it was, and we're going to put a line through and cut it. We already have it in fourths, and we want to just cut that in half. We're halving everything. So then what happens is now we've changed the size of our whole. We now have 8 parts, and we only need one of those. So this purple part is half of 1/4. So let's count how many parts we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now we have 8 parts to make up a whole. We only needed one of those 8. So mathematically what that looks like is 1/2 times 1/4. When you multiply fractions, the numerators multiply together and the denominators multiply together. So this is 1 times 1 divided by 2 times 4, which is 1/8. So visually what we're doing is we're taking our whole and taking the parts of our whole and cutting all of them in half, and then we just want to take half of whatever we had colored. So we had 1/4 color, so when we half that, we need only 1/8. We need less stuff, so we make our pieces smaller. When halving, you don't change the number of parts you have, you change the size of the parts. So our numerator here, our 1, never changes. We had 1/4 and 1/8. What changes is our denominator. It changes the size of the pieces that we have. A kind of shortcut that will work always for these that you can think about when you're halving fractions. Let's say we're going to halve 3/4. So what you can say, the numerator never changes. We don't change the number of pieces we have half of, so we know what we're doing. Okay, so our numerator never changes. We don't change how many parts we have, but our denominator always changes. We need our parts to be smaller, and with fractions, when you want smaller pieces, that means you're dividing it amongst more things or more people. Imagine you have our donut or our chocolate and you have to share it with even more people. The pieces that you get will be smaller. So we're timesing our bottom by 2 to make our pieces half as big. So instead of having 1/4 of a pizza, now we only get 1/8 of a pizza. So your piece is half as big as it was before. Keep the number of parts you have the same, and you change the size of the parts of the whole by doubling it. So here we have 1/3. Our whole is divided into 3 pieces. We only have 1 filled in, and we want to take half of 1/3. What you want to do is split the pieces, all of the pieces in half. So that would look like we would take, and we want to split this one in half, and this one in half, and this one in half. So we're splitting everything in half. Now our whole has 6 pieces. So we take, and we have 6 pieces in our whole, and we only want half of what we already had. So we just find one of those. Half of 1/3 is equal to, now we only have 1 piece colored out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So half of 1/3 is 1/6. Our number of parts haven't changed that we're talking about, but the size of our parts have changed. They're smaller. Let's do one more. 1 2/3. That means we have one whole and then a part, 2/3. So if we're going to half to 1 2/3, I like to think of this separately. I'm going to think of the whole and the 2/3, especially since we're cooking. If you're cooking, you want to stick with, you have like 1/4 a cup, 1/2 a cup, 3/4 a cup, 1/3 a cup, 2/3 a cup, right? We don't have usually like 1/6 a cup or 1/8 of a cup. So it's really handy to stay within these. So let's start by, we want to half everything. So we're going to, instead of drawing our hole with no pieces, we're going to draw our hole cut in half. And our 2/3, instead of being thirds, we're going to cut everything in half, and we're now going to have sixths. So visually, we just now have smaller parts. And what we need is only one part of our now halves. So we have 1/2, and we need half of our 2/3. So we have originally four pieces colored. So we just color in 2 of these. We color in 2 of these pieces, and now we have 2/6 because we have 6 pieces in our whole. So we have 1/2 and 2/6. Since we're cooking, we don't really have a 2/6 measuring cup. So this reduces to the same as 1/3. Or you can visually see, here's 1/3 colored in really thick now. This green one is, these 2 green ones is another third, and then these white ones is a third. So we have 1/2 and 1/3. 1 2/3 cut in half. And since we're cooking, this is a lot easier than figuring out what this is with common denominators, where we would be in sixths. And we don't have 1/6 of a cup, so we'll just stay with 1/2 and 1/3. Tips for cooking with fractions. Have fun. Fractions are a thing that so many people dislike, but it's because they're just thinking about them mathematically. So as you're cooking with your kids, get familiar with the sizes of the measuring cups and spoons. Have your child tell you what sizes you have. You know, let them talk about, oh, this one is bigger than this one, or this one is smaller than that one. Let them explore them by figuring out how many 1/4 cups will fit into 1 cup, or 1/2 a cup, or 3/4 cup. Have them, you know, maybe do oats or flour, whatever you're willing to have them mess with. Have them dump 1/4 a cup into 1/2 a cup until it's full. And just let them explore what that looks like. And then another really awesome thing to do is make visual fractions with their food. So we had donuts and chocolate bars up there. Maybe you make a quesadilla for dinner if your kids are anything like mine. And you can cut it into fourths and talk about, you know, when they eat 1 piece, now they only have 3/4 left. Or when they eat 2 pieces, now they have 2/4. Or maybe they'll recognize that it's 1/2. So the more visual you make fractions, the more concrete they'll be for your kids. If you enjoyed this, join the Great Summer Math Mix-Up, where next week activities goes hand in hand with cooking with your kids. We'll be using leftover marshmallows from a camping trip we recently did to make Rice Krispie treats. So the math is going to be ratios and scaling, and the end result is delicious. You can sign up in the link in the description.